Tuesday, November 12th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning, I want to talk about some warnings from people within the system. One of them is Ray Dalio, who owns the biggest hedge fund, or is this chairman of the biggest hedge fund in the world, if not the biggest, one of the biggest, right? He wrote recently, about a week ago, a little piece entitled "The World Has Gone Mad and the System is Broken." There's also a small speech or presentation by the president of Deutsche Bank about a week ago as well, a guy called Karl von Rohr. One of my viewers sent me a link to that speech. I'll put the link below in the description. It's from Bloomberg. And it says, negative rates warning, Deutsche Bank criticizes ECB policy. So what's going on here? You've got Ray Dalio and the president of Deutsche Bank, who have benefited from this system, right? If we didn't have QE and zero rates, negative rates in the last 11 years, those two institutions, Bridgewater Associates and Deutsche Bank, would not be doing as well as they are. Granted, Deutsche Bank hasn't been doing well for many years, but it's still going, right? I would say Deutsche Bank wouldn't even probably exist if it wasn't for all the bailouts, the QE, the monetary policy from the central banks, right? Not only Deutsche Bank, but probably all the other major international banks who are considered too big to fail, who are regulated by the BIS, right? Bridgewater Associates, their assets wouldn't have been inflated as much as they are. They wouldn't have almost like 150 billion under management, right? That would probably be more like 15 or 20 billion probably. And Ray Dalio wouldn't be listened to as much, and he wouldn't be as wealthy as he is. So what's going on here? How is it that the people who are benefiting or have benefited from this system are complaining and warning? Well, I think the analogy is of the athlete, Olympic athlete, who's been on steroids, who's been drugged to perform well, right? In the beginning, it's great. Things go well. They win all the races, all the medals. But then eventually, as their career goes on, they get ill and they die really early. You go back to the 70s and the Olympic athletes from the Soviet bloc, like the East Germans, the Soviets. The women were being given steroids. They didn't really look too much like women, right? And eventually they died very young. So I think that's what we're seeing now. The junkie financial system is dying. And they didn't think about that, the central bankers, right? And the policymakers and the governments that allowed this to happen. They didn't think that this would create the destruction of the system itself by trying to save it through all this monetary drug. The system, they've become junkies, and it looks like they want religion now. But I think it's too late. The only way for this system to be fixed is to cleanse the system, unfortunately. And it seems to me that we're getting near the end of this system. When you have people like at Deutsche Bank and Ray Dalio saying that the system is broken. Even people who are benefiting, they're the only people who are benefiting from this. All the wealth is being sucked out of the savers, middle class, the general public, into the very wealthy who have assets. The people that Deutsche Bank has as private clients, right? And by private clients, I mean high net worth individuals and the people who park their funds with Bridgewater Associates. They're benefiting from it. And in spite of that, the people who run these institutions are actually saying, no, this is bad, right? And it's interesting. I won't go through the whole, how can I say, presentation by the Deutsche Bank president. But I will say one thing he said is very interesting. is that European savers, it's been calculated by Deutsche Bank researchers, they're losing out 160 billion euros in interest a year. So that's how much this system is sucking out of the productive class, people who actually work to earn their wealth, their money, and they put it aside to try to save for a rainy day. This wealth has been sucked out, and it's probably even more, as the president of Deutsche Bank says, if you add inflation to it. So we're talking almost 200 billion euros, which is criminal, basically being confiscated from the general public through this policy, right? So that was an interesting point he made. Yes, and he put out that negative interest rates are hurting the financial system. It's the steroids and all the drugs now are having their side effect, right? And I think it's only a matter of time when the system implodes. So think of the Olympic athletes. They're gonna they had a very short life, right? The ones that were drugged and were on steroids. Yes, they won many medals, but then afterwards we found out that those medals really didn't mean much because they cheated, right? So the same thing is for the system. So how is this gonna play out in this environment, in finance? Well, I think it's gonna play out that we're gonna find out that there is nothing behind these financial institutions. It was all cheating, and the same thing for the asset markets, like the paper markets. It's all gonna have to reset, and they're gonna be worth a lot less. That's why I always warn people, and that's for them to decide, of course, not to have too much of their savings or wealth in these markets. Even the Deutsche Bank president says some of our clients are not prepared or don't have the wherewithal to have higher yielding paper assets. They want to keep their money in deposits. They're very conservative, right? But I would argue that you want to keep your money even outside deposits, because the currencies are they're gonna implode as well. They're part of this junkie system, and you need to have assets outside the system. As I've said, precious metals, gold and silver, some crypto. Crypto, of course, is very risky, and you need to do your homework. What about Ray Dalio? So that's the president of Deutsche Bank, right? Warning. He's saying that they're starting to feel it now, the financial institutions, right? This negative interest rate policy. So if they can't, even if the people who benefit from this are saying that we can't keep going with this, this is a warning bell, warning sign for everyone, I would say. Ray Dalio also, I'll put the link to his LinkedIn article below in the description. If you have access to LinkedIn. So this is what he says here at the end. I'll take one of his quotes. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It says, at the same time as money is essentially free for those who have money and credit worthiness, it is essentially unavailable for those who don't have money and credit worthiness, which contributes to the rising wealth, opportunity, and political gaps. Well, that's political uncertainty, right? Populism. Also contributing to these gaps are the technological advances that investors and the entrepreneurs that I previously mentioned are excited by in the ways I described, and that also replace workers with machines. That's the other thing. The cheap credit allows companies to do more R&D to get rid of workers and use machines, right? Because the trickle-down process of having money at the top trickle down to workers and others by improving their earnings and credit worthiness is not working. The system of making capitalism work well for most people is broken. There you go. This set of circumstances is unsustainable, and certainly it can no longer be pushed as it has been pushed since 2008. This is why I believe the world is approaching a big paradigm shift. So there you go. This is not Maneco 64. This is guys who probably wouldn't have talked about this a few years ago, guys who benefited from this, right? Ray Dalio, Deutsche Bank, warning. So let's go and quickly see where the markets are this morning. It's 10 to 8 a.m. Gold yesterday was doing well as usual. Early in the morning when I was speaking, we were at 1466. The Dow was down over 100 points, and then the US came in and everything was reversed. Happens like clockwork. There are those, of course, who don't think precious metals are manipulated. They think the massive short positions by the bullion banks is to hedge jewelry positions. They must be smoking something. Why would jewelers hedge so much on COMEX? It's crazy. No, that hedging is for the central banks to keep the price of gold suppressed. But that's not going to last forever. We know this system is on its last legs. So this morning, gold is above yesterday's low, which I think was around 1446. We're now at 1451.50. But yeah, we're getting the European banks in now, the bullion banks. So they've gold is down about $4 since yesterday's close. Silver kind of outperformed gold yesterday. We're at 1680, down about 5 cents. I noticed yesterday when the stock market was down just before the US Open, gold started being sold off. Silver didn't really follow, right? And there was the story of Boeing, that story that was floated out that their planes that killed hundreds of people, right, is going to be able to come out quicker. As Greg Manerino said, it's scandalous. That plane shouldn't be allowed to come out as quickly as possible. All these people think, of course, is of the stock price. I think it's also scandalous, Greg. Right now, the Dow is up 47. S&P is up 5. So we're at 3,092, 3,100. That's the key resistance there for the S&P future or index. NASDAQ 100 future is up 14. So yeah, the stock market is slightly higher. Currency-wise, we've got sterling down slightly. It went up yesterday, almost 1% on the back of Brexit party saying they're going to withdraw all their candidates from Tory seats, right? What do I think of that? Well, I think we're going to get a Brexit in name only, unfortunately, and Nigel Farage is like really betrayed his followers. Anyway, let's go to the euro. Euro is unchanged, 110.29. Dollar's a little stronger against the yen, 109.25, up 0.2. And the dollar's back below 7 against the yuan. It's down 1/8% at 699.80. Crude oil, fairly strong. WTI 57.07, up 0.4%, and Brent is at 62.01, up 0.4 as well. What about the bond market? The 10-year yield slightly stronger here, 195. It's up 2 basis points. So there you go. This is not maneco 64, right? Warning here. This is Deutsche Bank, Ray Dalio. The system is broken, and it's on its last legs. Always difficult to predict, of course, when it's going to happen. But the best thing is to be prepared, because once it happens, it's going to be very swift and you won't be able to protect yourself anymore. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and on DTube. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.